Hello and welcome to this special episode of our campaign, Let India Breathe. Let India Breathe has been generating awareness about the choking levels of pollution that India lives through on a daily basis and comes up with short and long-term solutions to curb this menace to make our air cleaner. It was hard to imagine that there will be a day when nature would have recovered after every possible conceivable abuse that has permanently damaged the earth. A thick cover of pollution and air quality index levels scaling unsafe levels had become the norm of every Indian, the India that we lived in. But the COVID-19 induced lockdown has turned the tables on that, has had a huge positive effect on the environment and quite immediate, with people in lockdown and industrial transport activities pretty much coming to a grinding halt. The skies have cleared up, becoming clearer with each passing day. The rivers are visibly purer, and after a long time, many cities have reported what is satisfactory AQI levels. Now, the big question is, how do we ensure that once the lockdown is eased, which it is, and activities resume, which they are, these safe and satisfactory levels do not peak again? To understand and get a larger perspective, we are joined by our esteemed panel. Please join me in welcoming environmentalist Ms. Sunita Narayan, Director General of Centre and Sciences and Environment, renowned cardiovascular and cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Naresh Trehan, Chairman and Managing Director of Medanta, the Medicity, Mr. Anil Srivastava, Principal Consultant and Mission Director, Mission for Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage, Niti Aayog, and Mr. Sohinder Gill, CEO, Hero Electric. I'd like to start and begin with Ms. Narayan of CSC. Ms. Narayan, the aerosol levels have now been at a 20-year low during the lockdown in northern India. Now, as per a report by the Centre of Pollution Control Board, 78% of cities in the AQI bulletin are falling in good and satisfactory categories, something which we'd never seen before. What do you reckon, Ms. Narayan, has brought about this change?
You know, we've had such an amazing clean air during the lockdown. That is very clear. We've all felt the change. We've smelled the clean air. We have felt our lungs have been able to breathe. We have heard the birds chatter instead of the car horns. But we also have to recognize that this has come at enormous cost. This is not a cost that we can take for even clean air. All livelihoods have been lost. There's been a complete lockdown. But there are two lessons that come out of this for the future. One, that it does take as much as a lockdown to clean up our air, which means that the scale of action that we need for the future is enormous. Please, let's understand that right now, we have virtually shut everything up. We've also understood that the source of pollution is the vehicles, because there are no cars on the road during lockdown, no trucks have entered Delhi, and industry is shut. Industry uses dirty coal for its combustion, and that's a key cause of pollution.
Dr. Trehan, now a recent study conducted by Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health pointed out that people in areas with high level of pollution are 15% more likely to die from COVID-19. Now, what are the possible cardiovascular complications of COVID-19? Because clearly there seems to be an indication towards that.
See, there are two types of pollutants. One is the particulate matter and the other is the noxious gases. The particulate matter actually is breathed through the lungs and then goes and creates irritation in the smallest pockets of the lung, which are known as alveoli. So if that happens, your lung capacity goes down, and your tissues are already damaged. So from that point of view, if you get a COVID-19 infection, which also goes through the lungs, through the respiratory system into the lungs, and on an already weakened lung, if the effects are much more severe, because what happens is the mechanism is, one, the oxygenation in that person whose lungs get affected becomes lower and lower. And even if you ventilate them with a ventilator, sometimes you're not able to overcome it. Now, there's also a discovery that it's a combination. It's a combination of damage to the lung tissue and also the fact that the little arteries that supply blood to the lungs where the oxygen exchange takes place, those also get clots in them. So one thing is that particular matter has to be controlled.
I want to Cut across to Mr. Srivastava for my next question. As Mission Director for Transformative Mobility, what are the issues that we need to address while we still, can curb vehicular pollution? Because we've been given a brilliant opportunity to possibly rework things from here on.
I feel that the opportunity is there, and the shift towards the cleaner sources of energy for the mobility purpose would be much faster because of the simple reason as the awareness is being generated and as people do have realized as to what is the role of environment and the fossil fuels or the petroleum sources of energy for the mobility purpose to arise. There is a lot of awareness about the electric vehicles, electric two-wheelers and electric cycles, electric bicycles and electric three-wheelers, and the government has very rightly put its focus on electric two-wheeler, three-wheeler and the electric public transport system. So I'm very sure that this is an opportunity to a better management of the public transport system, in which, and also we also look forward to the adoption of the battery, whether the lithium-ion battery, which are currently prevailing, and the cutting-edge technologies for the usage for the not only for the mobility and even for our restoring the cleaner sources of energy, which we are generating through the solar generation and through the windmill.
Sohinder Gill, as representative of the automobile industry, where have we gone wrong within this sector that has resulted in the Indian cities always scoring so high on pollution index?
So perhaps what has not really gone right is the lack of integrated and synchronized approach between different ministries and industry. City planning, urban development, automotive policymakers, they have perhaps not been integrating their efforts in one direction to see that the fallout of these policies don't have ill effects. As a result, we seem to be unnecessarily moving huge mass of people every day on the already saturated Indian roads. There's so much of chock-a-block traffic. Now, as per a recent study, I think we inhale 3 times more toxic gas in the slow-moving bumper-to-bumper traffic, and that's playing so much of havoc with our health. And that fact has to be juxtaposed into the solutions. To add to the woes, we have, till recently, we had no clear direction on switching to cleaner fuels, which has now come. And there has been no clear scrappage policy for the old vehicles that are so very polluting, 15 years old, spewing gases as well as particulate matter. So what we need perhaps is a comprehensive planning with all the stakeholders' involvement.
Now, how do we go ahead from here? There's a question I'd raised earlier. This recovery, incidental, how do we remain now on the path of recovery while we open up and the lockdown ends slowly?
What we have to do is to come up with a game plan now for this winter and for beyond. We can't talk long term. We have to talk about the fact that the gains of clean air cannot be lost. And for that, 3 things are urgent. 1, we must start today talking about and implementing a mobility plan in which we can take cars off the road, which means that we really need to talk about how we can work from home, how we can augment public transport, and see how do we actually make sure that the trucks that come into our cities today get scrapped and new vehicles come in so that we can get BS6 vehicles which are much cleaner. And that has to happen before this winter. We can do so. Our cities need to be able to walk, need to be able to cycle. We need to be able to integrate the public transport to the right to walk, the right to cycle. And with this, we need clean vehicles. That again can happen. The whole agenda for electrification is absolutely possible to do. It's needed to do in buses, in three-wheelers, two-wheelers, really three-wheelers, as well as in cycles. We must also remember that electrification is not clean per se unless we make sure that the fuel that is used or that the thermal power plant that is generating the power is also meeting the best emission standards. And as much as possible, we move out of coal into gas, into renewables. So we need to make sure that we don't push our pollution into the homes.
Right. All right. I want to cut across back to Dr. Trehan. You know, Dr. Trehan, there's so much that has been said about strengthening immunity, especially in the times of COVID-19. Now, what steps must the government and the people undertake, because everybody's doing what they can to strengthen cardiovascular health post the lockdown? What, in your opinion, sir, will ensure that post this lockdown phase, pollution-related disorders can be kept under check?
Best immunity that comes into our body is from muscle mass. Muscle mass comes from exercise. So if we are going to cope with, hopefully, pollution will not come back as badly as it has, because of the fact that there will be some changes in our environment where people will start working from home. There may be alternative coming to office. Then, of course, we know that if we do exercise regularly, the breathing exercises of yoga regularly, like the pranayam, like Kapal, which has Alom, Kapal Bharti and Basilica, that's the best way to keep your lungs clean, not only then but now. Because today also the route which the coronavirus takes is through our respiratory system. So one, if we keep our body healthy, our respiratory system healthy, we will be able to not only cope with corona, but we will also be healthier as we move forward into a polluted environment, which is bound to happen, but hopefully to much less degree. So for personal health, exercise, breathing exercises so that you clean your lungs regularly on a daily basis. Your heart will be able to stand more trauma because of the fact that you have been doing cardio exercises. Your circulatory system will be good, and your muscle mass will protect you not only otherwise, but also from this COVID infection and other infections.
Mr. Gill, you know, once the lockdown period is completely over, you know, if you look at it, we're already seeing the number of vehicles back on the roads. What do you suggest now, starting now, should be the next big step in mobility that will help us keep pollution levels under control and move towards possibly reducing emissions?
The first one and easiest to implement is obviously reduce the number of vehicles on the road, and which means more and more people to work from home. And we have seen it, we have experienced it. A large part of our travel, madly doing from 5 a.m. flights in the morning to midnight, can be substituted largely by work from home. And organizations are already doing it. As far as electric vehicles are concerned, two-wheelers and three-wheelers, like Srivastava was saying, they are ready to be deployed in large numbers. And they are not dependent on charging infrastructure or government support to that extent. So what we need is a push, a gentle push on these vehicles so that there is an adoption about this. And even electric two-wheelers prices these days, some of the range is lower than the petrol two-wheelers. Anybody who changes to electric for the next 3, 4, 5 years till his battery gets replaced, he has to spend only 15, 20 paisa in a day per kilometer. So that much of a attraction is there. What is not happening is there is not a word of mouth. There is no visibility of electric vehicles. People are asking each other and not finding enough on the road.
Right.
So one idea could be a combined effort by the government and the industry to spread the awareness and education about electric vehicles. I have been advocating Swachh Bharat campaign as a beautiful campaign where electric vehicles can be weaved in under the air pollution banner. Electric गाड़ी आपकी जेब के लिए अच्छी, देश के लिए अच्छी.
Right, Mr. Srivastava, you know, would you take off from that? What role do you foresee Mission for Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage playing in this to help us ensure that once India resumes industrial transport activities fully, we will not go back to what we were, which were choking?
We are in the process of giving support for the battery cell manufacturing in the country, and a lot of fiscal and non-fiscal incentives have been announced for the promotion of the electric vehicles. To tell the audience, about 20-25 major policy announcements were made in favor of the adoption of electric vehicles, including that of the benefits in the income tax pays to the tune of 1.5 lakhs of rupees. A lot of work is going on in developing the Indian standards for the charging infrastructure. Now the generation and the storage charges of a clean energy is coming out to be cheaper than the generation and the storage of the energy from the fossil fuel and from the traditional sources of the energy. But along with that, we cannot ignore the fact that we have to promote the shared mobility and the public transport system. For any reasonably good public transport or the bus transport system, there should be at least 100 buses per 1 lakh of the population. Whereas in our country, the average is between 12 to 13 buses per 1 lakh of population, which is 1/6, 1/7 of a normal situation. So that also gives us tremendous opportunity for the adoption of buses in the cities and
All right.
with that.
Okay, I'm going to go into a quick break. I urge our guests to stay with me. Now, while people are enjoying cleaner air currently, steps must be undertaken to maintain safe AQI levels once the lockdown is completely lifted and life completely, hopefully, resumes back to normal. Back in a quick break to stay with us. Welcome back to our special show of Let India Breathe. Before the break, we discussed how transforming India's mobility from gasoline-based to electric might be one of those very big steps to make sure that India continues to breathe healthy post the lockdown. I want to once again begin with Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill, what can we do now to motivate consumers? You were talking about consumer awareness. What can we do to motivate consumers to be a part of this paradigm shift that you were talking before the break?
Auto sector has a very significant role to play in communicating properly the value for money products and also the side benefits of environment about it. Like I said, Swachh Bharat campaign, obviously, this is one of them. But imagine that if the bigger player, the larger player, in their communication budgets of thousands of crore, they put one of this as a main objectives of communicating rightly what these electric vehicles can do for the environment. Like there is a saying that one electric scooter, if you buy and use for 5 years, you are planting 7 trees, full-grown trees. So such like messages have to pass to the common person.
Right.
We can redefine our vision and objectives in automotive sector and see to it that our businesses have bottom line approach as well as the approach of decreasing the greenhouse gases at equal level.
All right, okay. Mr. Srivastav, do you want to add to that? Because how can the government now provide incentive to it? Because yes, you can, try and look at the customer, try and give him incentive. What could be the government role in all of that to provide a possible strong framework that a consumer would be incentivized on his own?
We have already been giving direct fiscal incentive to the buyer. There could be a direct fiscal incentive from the supply side, of free of any registration fee. The commercial use of electric vehicles also is not requiring any permit fee. We also have thought about exemptions on the toll for the electric vehicles while crossing the toll roads to move forward.
All right, okay, Dr. Trehan, now in your opinion, do you see or do you reckon things will change on going forward, especially in terms of returning to normal life post-COVID-19 crisis? Will we look at things differently, especially where our health is concerned?
Most definitely. Life will be quite different. And I hope that the lessons learned here are not forgotten in short order. So today we know that, as we have heard again and again, that we have to live with the virus. It's not going away in the near future. That means our habits will have to be adapted in a way. We adopt masking, social distancing, all those things that we have talked about every day. But in addition to that, our priorities should also change. The point is we must consume less. What has happened is all this has led to a point where one thing aggravates the other. And the consumption in the society had gone so far that we have totally destroyed the environment. And living in Delhi or this NCR area is like living in a gas tank actually at least half the year. So if we are going to look at ourselves again, where our wastage of just getting into the biggest car you can find, having 4 cars in the driveway if there are only 2 people in the house, all these things will have to be looked at through a new prism, which we should have. So I think what will happen is, one, we will try to do whatever we can with less. If you are going to do something from outside, you will aggregate it and do it all in one go rather than go 10 times to the market. So these are all things that will become in our DNA to say, how do we live better, live cleaner, and more efficiently so that we can survive better.
One final question I'll take from Mr. Narayan. Mr. Narayan, is electric mobility one of the important changes that we need to introduce within Indian context to keep AQI levels of our cities in the satisfactory zone? Because that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this.
Absolutely. Electric mobility is part of the clean vehicles program that we need to promote. It's very clear that when it comes to CNG, it comes to electric mobility, these are the pathways for the future. But we need to prioritize where do we want electric mobility first. In my view, we want it in public transport. We need it for our buses. We need to have trams in our cities which use electricity. We need 2 3-wheelers to move on electric as electric vehicles, because last mile connectivity is the big issue. When you take a metro, you take a bus, you need to get last mile connectivity organized. That's where electric mobility plays a big role. You transform your city so that you can organize it so that you move people and not vehicles. And that's the role of electric mobility. But we need to get it together. We have been talking about electric mobility for just too long. And all the programs that we see are too scattered, too fragmented, and we just don't seem to have a game plan to ramp it up at the scale and the speed that is needed. And I think post-lockdown, our entire effort has to be, this is what we will do.
All right, with that, I will wrap up this special edition. While an overall structured strategy is needed to ensure that pollution levels do not peak again post-lockdown and choke the country, it is important to note that the road is to a clean future requires us to ride or drive electric vehicles. The government needs to provide a strong logistical and infrastructural support to manufacturers while incentivizing the sale of electric vehicles to motivate consumers. I'd like to thank all our guests for this discussion. With that, it's a wrap on our special episode. Keep watching India Today.